stellar, you know, array of panelists out here. Let me first take my question to Ms. Shradha Suri Marwah. She is the CMD of Subros. You have been, running a kind of very successful partnership with a Japanese firm. And of course, we know the kind of, we just heard from Mr. Bhargava, the success in which partnerships have come up in the OEM space. But in the auto part space, it's, it'll be unique to hear from you. What has made this partnership last for 35 years, for instance? And, what are the lessons one could gather from that?
Thank you. So, as Mr. Bhargava very rightly said, this marriage has to be based on trust, like any other marriage. We've been a Japanese JV for about 36 years now. And in fact, I think the auto component space in India started as, the JVs that started in India were the Japanese JVs. It's when Suzuki decided to come into India, they brought with them partners who then partnered with companies in India. Of course, we were propelled by the government, where the government pushed localization, and and from there on, rest is history, because today a lot of those Japanese partnerships have flourished and grown. But I think the essential thing in that is, in the auto component space, is stick to the core. So the moment as a partnership you've got your agenda sorted out, then it is important for the Indian partner to stick to the plan. And then you see what we as the Indian partner actually bring to the table is our resources in terms of the 4Ms, the man, the machine, the method. But what the Japanese partner actually brings in is experience and technology. So if we have the patience to bear with each other, I think it's a perfect match.
So when you say stick to the core plan, could you please explain?
So what happens in auto components is, as you go along and you start manufacturing, there is a tendency to actually expand, rapidly. It could be into ancillary, ancillary products, etc. I'm not saying expansion is bad, but I think that we need to make it more step by step. That's the strength of, the component space, because it's the components that make the vehicle. So therefore, stability is extremely important. Sometimes stability at the cost of growth as well. That's my view. Yeah.
Great. Mr. Banerjee, coming to you, you represent the Society of Indian Automotive Manufacturers, the OEMs. What are the areas of further cooperation? I mean, already we have a very successful association that Indian companies have with Japanese firms. What are the new areas of cooperation that you feel we could further work out in this particular segment?
Thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank the organizers. Society of Indian Automobile Industry is extremely delighted to be here at Indo-Japan 70. The enormous contribution has happened of this relationship, both in terms of OEMs, two-wheeler, four-wheeler, passenger cars, and also in the segment of commercial vehicles. The technology disruption is happening. If you look at 5 important contributions which this 70 years relationship has brought in. The first is technology. The second is Kaizen, or process or manufacturing, competitiveness. The third one is customer centricity. The fourth one is, which is the very important one, bringing a factor of jealousy among the complacent system which is within the country. And the fifth one is the new sustainable mobility roadmap by bringing all the stakeholders together. What I mean by these 5 elements, one is when the mobility arena is disrupting, transformation is so enormous that just to fathom the depth of where we are, whether it's a hydrogen fuel cell technology going where the Toyota is having a Mirai as a product. When you talk about the electric vehicles, so we have a battery-related disruptions happening. whether it's a market-driven swappable battery concepts, whether we have to go through this route or that route, or we talk about the disruptions happening in a manner where sustainability and carbon neutrality is the focus. In all these realms, I think the Japan is bringing enormous information, knowledge, and the future technology possibilities, which is actually preparing us better to take Indo-Japan 70 relationship forward.
Great, thank you. Now I come to Mr. Vikram Gulati, who is the country head and Executive Vice President Corporate Affairs of Toyota Kirloskar Motor, who again has a great tie-up, very successful partnership with a Japanese firm. Mr. Gulati, what are the kind of lessons one could draw, and which are the rough areas that are still existing? Because a few panelists in some of the earlier sessions also talked about, especially at the policy level, they know that the things that we need to improve upon when it comes to bettering our partnership. Your view.
Yeah, thank you for having me. First of all, as Toyota and Kirloskar, we've been here for now 25 years. This is a partnership that's grown well. And during these 25 years, we've delivered over 20 million vehicles in India. And we've been able to successfully work on our philosophy of QDR, quality, durability, and reliability. And that's largely because of the commitment to the entire supplier base to develop that supplier base, bring in that capability, handhold. And this journey is about being committed to a supplier, working together, and growing together. And that's the reason we've been able to reach a level of localization of around 85 to 88% for our mainline products like the Fortuner and the Innova. For a player with 4 to 5% market share, that's quite remarkable. So this is a bit about the past. Now going forward, there are 3 areas of disruption that can broadly be identified. 2 in the manufacturing side and 1 on the products that we manufacture. So if you look at manufacturing, the game has really been about being able to deliver best quality at the best possible costing levels or pricing levels. Till now, the game was about efficiencies, processes, skilling, etc. Now, going forward with technology evolving the way it is with machine learning, artificial intelligence, and IoT and additive manufacturing, all of these coming in, the game gets much more disrupted for the entire ecosystem. The second big disruption that we see is around how manufacturing is going to be viewed world over. And this is where the policy element comes in. Till now, people were conscious about being environmentally sustainable in terms of practices, but going forward, this is no longer going to be something that is desirable. It's an absolute must for sustaining your business. And in Toyota, ever since 2015, we've had a commitment to zero carbon, not only from the tailpipe, but from the life cycle of the products by 2050, which means zero carbon manufacturing by 2035. Now, if we do this and the supply chain doesn't do it or the dealership doesn't do it, it doesn't make sense. So the element that we have to bring into the entire value chain is bringing in hand-holding and supporting this sustainable way of manufacturing, which also means being sensitive to utilization of resources. And the last one is what was alluded to by Mr. Banerjee, is the complexity and the rapid change in technology, which is being pushed by the energy transition and the concerns over the environment, including climate change. There are multiple technologies going forward which can help you achieve this. There is electric, there is hydrogen, there is alternate fuels, etc. Now, how do you deal with this complexity? Because it also brings in additional complexity of customers wanting a much higher, much different products, depending basically based upon the technology offerings in terms of infotainment system, connected cars, autonomy, etc. One way we look at it is look at the final end goal, which in a way is delivering customer needs and societal goals, which is try to reduce the import dependence, fossil fuel reduction, carbon reduction, and do this while delivering product which is acceptable to the consumer. So from that philosophy, what we believe is a technology which delivers this is only an enabler. It's a means to the end, not the end itself. And therefore, we believe that government is doing a lot in this direction, and policies really need to be now focused on bringing in a link between, let's say, a carbon emission and manufacturing, carbon emission and the way products are taxed, for example, vehicles, because that's the simplest way of linking the socially desirable goals and leaving the OEMs and their supply chain to figure out what technology they need to deploy for what segment to be able to meet the customer needs. So that, in my mind, is going to be a critical element which is visible globally in terms of linking strongly linking policy to national desirable goals.
Okay, so thank you. Now I come to Yogendra Pratap, editor of Auto Today. Yogen, you have seen so many different types of vehicles over the last several decades, and you have test driven so many of them. We have just talked about the fact that auto is an extremely disruptive segment. Which are the areas that you feel that Indian companies should leverage their strengths better to compete in a wider market?
So the auto segment is undergoing massive disruption. The barriers for entry into this industry that have been existing for decades have suddenly come down to the bare minimum. An engine, an internal combustion engine, which is such a complex piece of machinery, is now reduced to an electric motor. That electric motor can serve it. So the opportunities are immense. The areas where there can be downfalls are also immense. Because as Mr. Bhargava was alluding to, safety, you have to look at multiple parameters. But just going back to Mr. Gulati's point, the government needs to have policies that are technology agnostic. If you are looking at a certain technology and what it gives in the end, that's how it should be taxed. It shouldn't be, oh, this is diesel, so it's bad. If diesel can drive engines that are clean at the tailpipe, yes, why tax them extra? If hydrogen can have the similar effect, fine, give them the tax benefits. A hybrid car that can reduce tailpipe emissions, give them the same incentives as you're giving to maybe an electric vehicle. So that was just an aside. So coming back, yes, so the industry is at a cusp of great opportunity. Globally also, there are so many disruptions happening. We've seen that we cannot rely on the traditional manufacturers and suppliers, and we are having problems with them. Actually, the world is having problems with them, and that places India in an even better place to leverage our advantages. And everybody keeps talking about, without volumes, we can't do anything. But the gentleman sitting next to me has a very successful venture in TCAP, where they make certain parts of a vehicle, say the gearboxes, for a range of vehicles for supply all over the world are made in India. So, there you have it. You have massive economies of scale, and these can be really exploited by India at this juncture. Again, with electric vehicles, infrastructure will follow. It's a chicken and egg situation. I think lots of people are mistaking the fact that Indians adapt to new technologies very, very fast. So if Maruti tomorrow, or like Maruti and Toyota have today decided hybrid cars are a way to go, people are embracing hybrid cars. It's not as if they are costing double or triple, despite having two powertrains in one. Similarly, electric cars, if the market leaders, some of these Japanese companies now have a stranglehold over the Indian automotive industry, passenger car industry. If they decide tomorrow that, yeah, electric vehicles are the way to go, then it will happen. It will happen overnight. The change will be very, very quick. And these are some of the areas that we can look at exploiting.
Great. I come to Shradha. During COVID, we understood the importance of having a very efficient local manufacturing. When we saw disruptions happen from the inputs from China, for instance, and later from other parts of the world, and OEMs, sort of really struggled. The government has come up with the Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, and then the PLIs were announced later. Where do you think India stands in its capabilities as a global manufacturer? Maybe you can talk about some of your experiences, and what are the rough edges that we need to smoothen out here?
So I think that, we are poised in a very good place. The auto component segment, as it may, has already been through a very big learning curve over the last 40 years. It's a fairly structured industry. A lot of us are already global suppliers. The good thing about us in India is that we are very adaptive and also very malleable. So even in times of COVID, I think India and the Indian auto component manufacturers were the first one to get themselves up and going and start supplying not only to their customers here, but also globally. Schemes by the government, of course, different people have different views on them, but whatever schemes that have come up to propel manufacturing in India, and I'm not just talking about the PLI, we've had various schemes that have come in the past as well. They have propelled auto component manufacturers to actually invest in localization. See, without localization, this is a zero game. And no OE is going to give you a cost benefit for being more expensive. If we were to reduce cost and get economies of scale, like China did or anybody else did, then we have to localize and use that strength to then supply both domestically as well as export. I do see a few challenges. The challenges basically come in the form of technology. What we do lack is actually technology. So that's where our partners, or in the case of the Japanese partners, they step in. And when I say technology, it's not just product technology. It's also very precise process technology, tool technology. So I think we need to now shift gears from just part localization to design in India. So I think design and development and testing and validation in India is the next level of localization that is needed. So that's my take on that.
Okay. Mr. Banerjee, she just talked about the fact that, we can't be dependent on China, and a lot of companies have come up with the China plus one strategy. How do you think this has been working in the Indian context? You keep talking to different OEMs, coordinating with them. What has been the success of this so far? I mean, how long have we to go in that direction?
I think it's very fascinating to see that in the Indo-Japan relationship at 70, our penetration in the market across the globe in two-wheeler, we are one of the largest. Actually, 2015, we took over China. And the number of countries, more than 145 countries, the export is happening. There we are able to actually meet the customer expectation and remain in a lead position. That position has been acquired with sustained improvement in not only the technology, manufacturing competitiveness, the reach to the customer, and understanding the psyche of the customer. I think we are at a cusp of a time when India is actually arrived with this relationship maturing to the level. Often I feel that if I relate it with our lifetime stories, then one of the survey indicated that the best period of our life, a decade, is actually 60 to 70. While somebody may say my childhood was great, but childhood, adulthood, and family life versus. So 60 to 70 is found as the best period because you are done with all your basics, expectation settings, planned your investments well. So same way in Indian and Indo-Japan context, Actually, we are all set to now look outward, local manufacturing, market global, and the kind of policies which Mr. Bhargava was mentioning about, I wish those policies were then, which is now. So whether it's a standard, regulations, policies, the logistic, infrastructure facilitations, so all are actually setting in a context that India would be able to cater to the global market. And the changing disruptions are also an opportunity for us. And that's the reason you see whether it's a PLI scheme or FAME 1, FAME 2 schemes or the schemes which is forward-looking with so much focus on hydrogen economy being worked upon. It's with that goal where we will be able to actually meet our expectations, and India could be actually playing a lead role in sustainable mobility realm.
Okay. Mr. Gulati, are you happy with the progress of the PLI scheme so far? You know, there are both sides to it. Maybe it is still in a nascent stage. When it comes to making in India for the world, you know, what are the areas that concerns us still, and we can make further changes?
So I think PLI was an excellent intervention by the government. Couldn't have come at a better time, given the fact that you have redrawing of supply lines globally because of geopolitical reasons, COVID impact, focus of OEMs globally to look at, not just relying on one set of supply chains. So it couldn't have come at a better time. With 1.93 trillion rupees on the line in 14 sectors, it's been extremely well thought out. It's a holistic look at where India needs to invest and give a direction to the industry to come in. For example, if you look at automotive, you can see that there is PLI on semiconductors, there is PLI on advanced chemistry cells, there is a PLI on advanced technologies in the automotive space, which is on a parts side, neutral of technology, allowing for all newer technologies to come in. So what that helps you do is it helps you get ecosystem and value chain created along the entire line. Of course, it's very smart because it doesn't front load all the 1.93 trillion rupees of investment that the government is looking to put at. It's creating clear expectations to the industry in terms of what to do and what is required to be done, with very clear goal setting, and the incentives are linked to that. As far as we are concerned, you mentioned about TCAP, with a lot of innovative back-end work in trying to localize to the extent of even localizing the machines that were required to create that facility. We've been able to create, have an investment around 5,000 crore rupees recently going into manufacturing of the E-drive, which is a key component of the electric powertrain that can power any of the electrified technologies. And one of the key elements has been PLI, which has encouraged us to do that. Going forward, I think the key thing we as India need to look at is there is no one solution to each market. There is no one common solution. The end goal has to be very clear in terms of energy security and climate change mitigation. And if that be so, we need to look at what works for our market, where our strengths are, where are our weaknesses. For example, in the electrified space, we know very well there is an overwhelming dependence on critical parts on a particular market. We got to figure out how to, get over that. One way of looking at it is, smart solutions. For example, battery swapping. That can get you electric and running in many times over with minimum use of resources. It's a very innovative thing, IT intensive, where we are good at. The other things are you've really got to mix and match the segments and technology where you have the right to win. For instance, if it comes to two-wheelers, three-wheelers, electric along with, let's say, battery swap type solutions makes very good sense. Maybe short distance small car, maybe it's electric also. If you go in for bigger formats, you got to really look at other options like biofuels, ethanol, hydrogen for larger formats. And there are now segments, particularly in technology, where we are not really far behind. Ethanol and biofuels is one. We have the ecosystem. The ecosystem just needs to be tweaked. And we are competitive in this ecosystem. Hydrogen is one which is emerging. We're not too far behind. Japan is good at it. So maybe Japan-India partnership in that area can put us ahead of the curve. And last but not the least, and this is critical, while we undergo this transition, this energy and environment-linked transition, we've got to think through how this transition is going to pan out, because for the entire ecosystem, whether it's the OEMs or the suppliers, this period is going to be of immense disruption, possible disruption. If we can make this disruption smoother or remove the disruption and make the transition smoother by technological choices we make or freedom of technological choices that we offer to the value chain or the industry to deliver the goals, that would be critical to be able to give them the ability to move to the next paradigm. Thanks.
Okay. Yogin, what is your view? Are Indian companies ready to adopt some of the breakthrough?
First of all, going back to PLI is fantastic. I think we need to develop capabilities in the country, and this is a great way to help industry focus and develop these technologies. Like Vikram said, hats off. I think it will bear fruit and show results over a period of time. Work has already started across various sectors. So that is one. Number two, while a certain neighbor of ours dominates in some of these critical components that are required for the future of mobility, it's not as if these technologies are not available anywhere else. We shouldn't find shortcuts and just go to, the companies, a couple of companies I'm seeing behind me, like Toshiba and Panasonic, they have fantastic research and development on battery chemistry and solutions that will suit Indian climate conditions and the Indian scenario where probably driving distances aren't great, charging times, smaller batteries to reduce costs, shorter charging times. So we have to think of, yes, electric vehicles is one of the way forward. It should be offered, or government should not offer one technology. It should open up all technologies. It should be a free playing field for all technologies, is what I'm trying to say. Electric powertrains will be one of them. Japanese companies are really at the high end of these technologies, and we are already collaborating with them for some of the hybrid powertrain batteries that are being used by Maruti, for example. And I think if the government lays out a more sustainable roadmap, which is technology agnostic, then I think it will be a very good for the country, and we can play a much bigger role in the global scheme of things.
Thanks, Yogin. In fact, automotive sector is one of those segments that is a sort of benchmark when it comes to the country's manufacturing capabilities are concerned. It's also a huge provider of jobs because right through the entire supply chain, millions of jobs are provided by the segment. Maybe we could, as a final round, we could maybe each of you could come up with, say, 3 things that corporates or the government should do, which can give a further impetus to collaborations with Japanese firms or partnerships with countries like Japan. That will take us, our industry, make our industry truly world class. Maybe you could start with you, Shradha.
So I think we need more platforms where this matchmaking can happen. We've just, in the past 2 years, the traction on this has actually increased. So it's not just the tier ones, that make up the entire supply chain in this space. We have to look at actually the tier twos and tier threes and the MSMEs. I think we need to focus there now, because they are the ones who are actually sitting at that inflection point where they can actually propel themselves forward. So I think it would be interesting if the government could actually be, and we could work with the government and actually propelling that space a little bit. And
through more financial assistance, etc.? How do you?
no, I think more than financial assistance, it is actually providing a platform. Most of them don't know what's out there. They want to. There's a desire, there's a fire, but a lot of them don't know what to and how. So I think if we can provide that sort of platform, that would be great, because the government has this huge. The other thing is that we have this huge skilling India. That is happening, and that is really good. And I think our sector is one which is really skilling India. I'm not saying others are not, everyone is, but we're also really skilling India. So there's a huge potential out there. I think these are the two areas that we could actually look at.
Mr. Banerjee?
Just to add what Shradha mentioned, I would like to suggest three things. Number one, mobility is emerging as a service. No longer it remain in the domain of as a product. So I think mobility as a service in the context of the kind of demographic diversity we have with the rural and urban divide. I think with Japan we should collaborate to define mobility as a service, what the best option could be offered to in long run. That's number one. Number two, because the technology disruption is happening, whether it's a battery, fire-related concerns, which is prevailing in every country, and we being a country with a little bit different tropical and climatic conditions compared to Europe and America, where thermal management of the battery is more critical. So there the collaboration can happen. And number three, I think consortium-based identified projects needs to be worked upon between the Indo-Japan collaboration. And there we need to define very clearly with regards to standards, regulations, policies. Standard regulation policies to help promote, facilitate migration to hydrogen or maybe electric or maybe whichever is sustainable mode of energy transition for the mobility application. So these three things I would suggest need to be taken up on priority so that future can be assured.
Okay, going to Mr. Gulati.
Yeah, so I'd say stay committed as an OEM, stay committed to localization, work with the supplier-based entire value chain, not only in terms of working with them on skilling side, but also in sustainable manufacturing, because that's going to be the next big challenge. Second, if you look at from the government side, I would really have to, it's my duty to acknowledge the fact that the government is already agnostic in terms of energy transition. It's talking about ethanol, it is talking about electric, it is talking about hydrogen, and it's also talking about the gaseous form. So they are doing that policy from a technology neutral point of view, and even policies when you look at FAME or let's say others, they are aligned. The only thing perhaps now we need to transition to is something like a carbon-based taxation for GST, which many countries have adopted, which kind of totally transforms your market in technology adoption. And secondly, I think government's focus on lowering the transaction costs with the huge investments that are happening on the national infrastructure pipeline and the logistics sides is fabulous, and I think they just need to carry on doing that. With that, I think a lot of the things are going to get resolved on their own.
Yeah. So the government has already done a lot. The GST structure, I think, needs a rethink because we started off with the hybrids being somewhere in the gray area. Then, some people also misused the word hybrid. So then it went into the dark side, and electric vehicles then were straight away favored. So, I mean, the transition doesn't have to be direct. It can be through whatever technologies that companies feel comfortable adopting, and the pathway should be clear for getting there. So it should not be 50% or 5%. There can be differentiation in structure. If that can be clear and laid out and be followed over a sustained period of time, will help the transition. The infrastructure in terms of roads, yes, the new development that is happening is fantastic, but we also need to have a legacy infrastructure up to mark. So that is lagging behind, and where we are doing patchwork stuff leads to then questions about safety, about mobility solutions and how safe they are, and car makers, the kind of cars they're making. So all those questions come into play. Third is we have already decided that we are going to have our own crash test norms. I mean, Japan has, there's a big fallacy going around which says, oh, okay, this car is safe, this car is totally unsafe because it is meeting one certain new car assessment program, which they call global. It's nothing, so it's not global per se. So Japan has its own, Europe has its own, the US has its own, and different cars perform differently if they are made for those different programs. India is going to have its own test norms, and we should just wait for them and see that the cars meet those regulations. If that can be speeded up, yes, I mean, that's another plus.
Great. So with that, we have sort of run out of time, and we have come to the close of this particular session. And I hope we had a good discussion looking at various aspects of this extremely, extremely important sector, and where there are already great partnerships that exist, but there is potential for much more to be done in this segment. Thank you all so much for being part of this panel and enlightening us with your thoughts. Thank you. Thanks once again. A big round of applause to all the panelists out here.
And could I also have Mr. Bharat Joshi, Chairman Joshi Konoike Transport and Infrastructure, on stage to felicitate our guests.